And I think that having talked to so many folks who've been involved over decades in those operations and the extent to which they have the ability to make that happen, I approach this with extreme caution. And for that reason, I would ask other people to, that calmer heads need to prevail here. That my interest is a future that is marked by universal peace, not endless war. Now, if we stampede the public into all kinds of frightening information from the past or what we're seeing as the future, and that is then used the way 9/11 was used, or the way the Iraq weapons of mass destruction were used, or the Gulf of Tonkin were used, and I know that that's the plan, then we could end up with the mass panic in the public being utilized to aggregate more power around the militarists and the military-industrial complex and those uber elites who want to sit atop the world manipulating everyone in an us versus them worldview. And I thought to myself, I'm not going to say who this man was. There was a head of a religious organization back in the 90s, I believe, when I met with him. Very large global organization. And when we were talking about this, and this is a man who's dedicated his life to world peace and to enlightenment, as soon as he heard of the ET issue, he says, oh, and this is not someone in the cabal, this is a man on the street, sort of, but a big figure internationally. That'd be great, because if the public finds out about aliens, we can have world peace because we can unite everyone against a threat from out there. He went from A to B, like Ronald Reagan, like that. And this is a man otherwise of enormous enlightenment. I'm telling you, this is the danger. This is the thing that my wife and I talk about probably more than anything over the last 25 years about this issue, is me getting off the stage, because I don't want disclosure of this subject to then be used and hijacked for the purpose of saying, yes, there are ETs, but guess what? They're here to eat us for lunch, and now we have to have World War III. I don't want, see what I'm saying? I have to tell you, that's why I'm here tonight, because this is what keeps me awake at night. This is my biggest fear. My biggest fear is that disclosing this information gets hijacked and spun into this War of the Worlds, Independence Day kind of scenario, and that I would have forsaken my medical career and spent 26 years of my life and had very close friends murdered to add fire to interplanetary war? No. That's not. I don't want that to be what I'm working on. And as I see it, groups that are otherwise very dedicated with a view of a conscious, evolved world, or Gaia, an enlightened, awake planet, as a platform where so much of that, some of that information is then portraying various ET races as these horrific, torturing, slave trading, species. And I think to myself, wow, they've already got the warmongers. They could get the man on the street by hoaxing something. Now they're trying to co-opt even the progressive community. I'm being very blunt, and I know that I will get a lot of emails complaining. And it isn't about that. I mean, I've always had a policy to try to avoid talking about personalities. But I'm just deeply concerned that there is a juggernaut. And I think that we have to think about what are we doing to the world in the human consciousness when terrifying aspects of interstellar civilizations are presented as absolute fact, when there's the possibility there is this dark hand of the intelligence community that has scripted this and hoaxed it. What are those implications? They're huge. And I think there is a moral and ethical question here. And I will be honest with you, that's the only reason I'm doing this tonight. I think this is a matter of enormous moral and ethical concern that is not being discussed properly and fully. And I think we have to, I would rather stop everything I'm doing than to propel further disclosure if what it leads to is piggybacking onto disclosure, this fearsome new world order of interplanetary conflict and hatred. That is not what I've dedicated my life to. So that's my big concern. I'm being as honest, speaking from my heart as I can. Other questions? Yes, sir.
So, like recently, as you spoke about with Independence Day, and
Yeah.
One I saw a few nights ago, The Arrival, which was wasn't very violent, but all these movies coming out with, I mean, it's totally obvious the propaganda in it. Thank you. When it comes down to it, because all the kids my age, I know that they all view this whole world like Independence Day resurgence, which was perfect in terms of displaying what the world would turn out to be. When it comes down to that, we're all kind of being geared in this direction of war and hatred, as you just explained.
Yeah, manipulated.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
What, especially to the younger generations, what is the best shot in terms of trying to enlighten people on this subject? I know you've spoken of getting free energy out, spiritual awakening, and all those things. But what do you think is the best shot to get us out of this world?
Well, I think that, to unlock this in a way that people will get behind and not be afraid of, and it is to speak the truth, which is what I'm trying to do, and people need to speak it to their own colleagues and cohorts. But I think the other thing we're wanting to do, although we haven't quite got it set up yet, we're wanting to do a disclosure concert that would have the top music acts in the world. Anybody out there, let's get the Foo Fighters and Bono of U2 and Lady Gaga and Katy Perry and everyone on a stage, and doing something so that a message that we're not alone, the universe is there, but in a way that says, now what's the next phase in human society? The next stage is not just internationalism and globalism at all. It's interplanetary, and it's enlightened, and it's an enlightened civilization. And I think this is something that, if people understand what the implications are of the secrecy, that 100 years of conscious evolution on this planet has been robbed by classified projects that have kept these technologies in a box and are now misusing them and have been misusing them for 60 years on people and hoaxing events rather than running your house and car. So there's no pollution. So people who care about the environment, people who care about world poverty, you need to connect. That what I tried to do beginning back in the 90s was to connect those dots. That the secrecy is anathema to a civilization that's sustainable and peaceful and just. So people who are concerned about that can be gathered together. And that's most people on the earth. The vast majority of people on the earth do not benefit from fossil fuels and nuclear power and secrecy. It's a very small number of people. And those people who would be displaced in a free energy economy, because at that point you've got such abundance, as a tide that'll lift the whole world, can be taken care of very easily and brought into other occupations besides digging up things and burning them or exploding them. So there is a way to get us out of this. And one thing I do want to say is that I am incredibly, I think the near term is fraught. I'm not going to say it's easy. One thing about being an emergency doctor, you come into my ER and you have a headache and I find a brain tumor, I ain't going to tell you you got a migraine. I'm going to tell you you got a brain tumor. So right now the humanity has a metastatic tumor of corruption and secrecy, which needs to get treated. So we have to acknowledge where we are. But I'm fully confident that we can recover from this, and we can begin a civilization that will allow us to do what I call a time snap, where we could and should have been 100 years ago with free energy from Tesla, et cetera, and so on, we could get to that in 15 years. By the time this young man is in college or past, we would have no pollution, no poverty, things that float instead of highways digging up the ground, and the beginning of an interstellar relationship with other planets that's peaceful. I think that's something that can happen very, very quickly once it begins to happen. But we need a critical mass of people coming together as a movement to do it. And so that's where the energy for me. And I think that I had a beautiful lucid dream about a year ago, almost exactly. So great you asked this question. And it was a lucid dream with a group of ETs, beautiful. And they specifically said you need to be doing things to reach the young generation, the next generation. And I was told those between 15 and 34 or something like that, you know, like that. And it was very specific. And I've still been searching for a way to do it because, you know, I'm sort of an anachronism. I mean, I don't mean to sound like a, you know, over the hill, but I do still bench press 410 pounds. So most of the buddies I have in their 20s, they come tangle with. Matter of fact, my son-in-law said, we're going to make a club to take on Papa. That's my name for the grandchildren, Papa, because I'm a beast. But I think that but I think that that this really is a great issue, and my guidance in the contact I've had with these interstellar people is that we really do need to get the involvement of folks who are from their late teens into their 30s heavily involved in this. But it doesn't need to be through Tom DeLonge saying, you know, there's evil aliens out there and the military's doing a great job of kicking alien butt, which if you distill a lot of what he's been saying on Coast to Coast and other shows is about that bad. So we need to have voices that are providing information. And I'm sorry, Tom, because we've known each other for a long time. This is all very painful for me. I guess you're gathering that. But that we have got to find a way to speak of this and act in a way that redounds to a beautiful future, not a disastrous one. And so I think that that's why we need to explain to people in their 20s and 30s that this world is going to be your world very soon. It is your world now, but you're going to be running it. And what do you want to have? You want to have endless war? You want to take 9/11 in Iraq and Afghanistan and then expand it to interplanetary war? Do you want to have another 100 years of global environmental destruction? Or do you want to have world peace, universal peace, free energy? And it needs to be said that starkly to everyone, from China to Russia to all over the world. And the reason I would love to organize a concert, a global music festival that would be live streamed all over the world is for that message to reach younger people. Yeah. So those of you who can help make that happen, give me a jingle. Okay, a couple more questions. Well, let's do, we don't want to ignore this group. Or someone in the middle.
I want to ask you, how can a person authenticate the difference between in the dreams and sightings, in the dreams and in the sightings that people experience, how can they authenticate the real genuine article versus phony, illusional things? Like when you said you had a lucid dream with, how do you know that's real and that's not a directed operation type of situation?
That's right. And this is a great question because, you know, how do you know? Well, you have to be brutally honest with yourself, and you also have to know enough that there could be both. If you don't know there could be both, you're never going to ask the question, was it one or the other, right? Whether it was ET or some man-made electronic warfare system. So knowing that is the first step. Then the second step is looking at how it unfolded. Were there, and I've actually interviewed a number of people who had really clear memories of an alien abduction, but then when they go deeper into their memory, there were people who were directing these robotic aliens. Now that's gotten covered up in a lot of the abduction research. So a part of it is looking at this and beginning to question everything. And I think if anything, tonight what I'd like to tell people is question everything and begin to look at everything very freshly.
From a mechanical point of view.
But from a mechanical point of view, distinguishing an interstellar vehicle from a man-made, that's pretty easy. When I take teams out, the phenomenon that happens that's interstellar, that's transdimensional and interstellar has a very distinctly feel and look versus an invasive. Now we've had both happen. We have had man-made intrusions into our contact sites, and it's quite obvious. It didn't fool anybody. They were hoping it would, but it didn't. So a lot of that is experience and how it happens, whether it's invasive, how it feels, how it looks, knowing what the technologies are. So, you know, in a couple hours I can only go through so much data. But this is something that's really a subject. When I take people on a whole week intensive, this is information we go into very deeply, where we go out under the stars at night, during the afternoon we're doing all of this information and remote viewing training so that you can remote view. And ultimately we set up experiments so that we can see if our discernment is being tricked or not. Yeah, for remote viewing.
On your website?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of information, and there's actually training programs on the website and everything else at SeriousDisclosure.com. Yes, so someone back here.